welcome back again to our orientation session. This part is actually titled Registration Part 2, or the final part of the registration process. So if you're watching this video, it would mean that you have to connect with the first part that we looked at, registration. So here we're basically going to look at the things that you need to have once this process is actually completed. Okay? So we're looking at the things that you are supposed to have when you complete this registration process. So basically, when we talk about registration, we're looking at the formal way in which the student details are entered into the school system. So you apply, and then you get registered. By registration will mean your details will actually be entered into the school system formally. Yeah, so this process comes with a lot of things, okay? So this process will allow you to actually have courses, or you'll be allocated courses. And then you'll also be given a student portal number or the ID number. So the student portal number or the ID number is basically a number that reflects in the school system that actually is used to identify the students. And then we're looking at also the process or the last phase, which is the ID or the student identity card. So once you complete this process, you'll be given courses, you'll be given a student portal number, and then you will also be given a student portal, and you will get to be captured for an ID to symbolize that you've actually been registered, or you're part and parcel of the students that belong to Chestnut University. And proceeding further, so we're looking at the process or the final process. So the final process has got these things, okay? So we are looking at the first part, which is the registration transcript. Remember, I mentioned something to do with courses. So the registration transcript is simply a formal document that is actually given to a student once they register. So once your details are being entered into the school system, the school will give you a feedback in form of the registration transcript, which is a document that will reflect courses, that will reflect course codes, that will reflect all your details in relation to the school and how they appear in the school system. And then you also have the student portal, okay? You also have a student portal, so we'll look at what a student portal is and what you're supposed to do as a student. And then we'll also look at assessments. So assessments will have midterm assessments. In some institutions we call them continuous assessments. So we will look at what is needed and what this leap is all about. And then we'll also look at the final end, which is the examination transcript, or the document that is actually required by students in order for them to be allowed to sit for an exam. So registration transcript, this is actually the picture, okay? So from the picture you have the details. You have the school details, and then you have the student name, so it actually reflects your name, the school, as well as the program that you are actually doing, and the courses that you have been given to, as well as the student portal number. So in actual sense, we're saying a registration transcript, or the registration transcript, is actually basically a document that reflects the student details, the way they appear in the school system. Okay, so this is how the registration transcript, or rather the contents of the registration transcript, so it will actually reflect the program, what the student details. By student details, it will reflect your name, your surname, and other details that they tend to you. And it will also reflect the program of study, or the course that you are actually studying. And then it will also reflect the courses or the subjects, in other words, the courses that you are supposed to take in that particular semester. And then it also reflects what the course codes, okay? Or the abbreviations that comes in form of numbers and letters that reflect the courses that you're supposed to take. And then it will also have the student portal number or the ID number or the number that the school will actually be using to identify a particular student once they are entered into the school system. So basically we've looked at the registration transcript and the contents of the registration transcript. So let's proceed now to what we call the student portal account. Okay, I've been actually mentioning this term for quite some time now, so let's actually get to look at what it basically is right now. So we're saying once the student gets registered and their details are actually entered into the school system, an online platform will actually be activated on their behalf on the school platform or on the school online platform. So we're saying a student portal is an online platform that is activated on behalf of the students in order to actually facilitate virtual interactions between the school and the students, regardless of wherever they are, as long as they are able to actually access internet. And the student portal will actually reflect the following, okay? So it will have the student details, so the student portal will actually have the student details, and then it will also have the program of study, it will have study materials, so if the student has got the registration transcript, those courses that are appearing on the registration transcript, the materials or the study modules can be accessed on the student portal or on the virtual online platform that is actually activated on their behalf. And then it will also be actually giving updates or constant updates in form of interactions. If the school has got any updates, the students can also be able to actually access those updates virtually or using online platform, as long as they are able to actually access internet. And then we have examination and assessment folders. So in an event that the school or that the students rather writes an exam or any form of assessment, the school will be able to actually communicate to a student or to give a feedback to a student in form of assessments. Rather, if there are any results that needs to be checked, they will be actually communicated through to a student using the student portal. So basically what I'm actually saying is that you have to actually note that this account can only be accessed using the student portal number. Okay? So this account is activated on behalf of the student, and then it can only be accessed using the student portal number. And then allow me to actually urge the accepted student that they are not supposed to actually tamper with the password or rather the username or the computer number itself, because once they do that, it will actually mean that they've actually isolated themselves from the school system, meaning the school won't be able to actually communicate or rather interact with them. So basically we'll look at the student portal and what it is and what can be found into the student portal and how important it is to a student. So let's now proceed further to assessment requirements. So by assessment requirements, it would mean all the activities that will be done in relation to the courses that a student has been given or in relation to a semester. So all the learning activities that will take place during the semester, when they are put together, they are called assessments, or they would rather be termed as assessments. Okay? So the school will actually assess the student if at all they've actually grasped the information that is related to that semester. So the school will give them some assessments, and then they will actually expect a form of feedback in form of, so assessments can actually be in form of assignments, activities, as well as exams, to mention by a few. So we'll look at the assessment requirements. or rather, what are the requirements that a student needs to have in order for them to actually undergo this process where a semester is actually concerned in relation to assessment. So we're looking at midterm assessment slip. Okay, so midterm assessment slip, this is actually basically a slip, or rather a document that is given to all registered students so that they can actually be allowed to sit for mid-term assessments, or some of them in some institutions they call them continuous assessments or CATs. So they will actually be required to actually get this slip. So as an institution, we put it as a mandate that each and every student is supposed to get this slip so that it reflects the permission that they're supposed to actually sit for those courses. Okay? And then we'll look at the overall, overall continuous assessment. So, as a requirement for a person to actually sit for an exam at this institution, okay, for a person to actually sit for the overall assessment, which is called the end of semester exam, they are supposed to have a continuous assessment, or the CA, which is not less than 15/40. Okay? So the continuous assessment is not supposed to be less than 15/40. And basically, we're saying once that is done, if the student's continuous assessment is actually complete, they will actually be able to be given an exam slip or a document that will reflect a list of courses that will actually, request the examiner to actually permit a student or a particular student to sit for the reflecting courses that are reflecting in the students in the exam slip, rather. So we have actually looked at the assessment requirements. So what we've talked about the midterm exam slip or midterm assessment slip that will actually, which is basically a document that will actually permit a student to sit for mid-term assessment or mid-term continuous assessment, okay, in preparation for them to actually have a complete CA that will actually permit them to sit for an exam. So this is what we've actually looked at, okay? So we looked at the registration transcript, we looked at the details that are contained in there, the student details, the student portal number, and allow me to actually make mention to say this document can only be accessed to those that have actually paid the minimum amount that is actually required for the registration process. So if you do not have this document, that will actually mean that your details haven't actually been entered into the school system. If you do not have a student portal, it will mean that your details are still pending the process of being entered into the school system. And then if you do not have, if in an event that there are any assessment going around and you haven't gotten any of the assessment requirements, documents that we've actually talked about, which is the midterm assessment slip, as well as the examination assessment slip, it would mean that you didn't actually complete the registration process. And so having looked at the registration process, I believe by now, most of you have actually started now comparing, if at all you have the registration transcript, if at all your student portal number is active. It will mean that if you have the computer number, if you have a student portal number, and your student portal is active, and you have a registration transcript, and you are able to actually access your study materials, it will mean that the registration process has actually been completed. And so we've actually been talking about this to say we need to have these assessments and we need to have these documents or this process to be to be well conversant with what we're doing or the process that we're doing. So we need to be extra careful, and we need to actually follow this process so that we do not get left out. So a review of what we've been looking at, we've been looking at the registration process part 2, or the final phase of the registration process that allows a student to get registered formally. So if you're a student who was accepted at Just Life, by now, if you're registered, you should have the registration transcript, you should have the student portal, and by now you should have a student portal number so that you can access and get familiar with the student portal so that you do not miss out. And if you are able to actually access the study materials, it would be advisable that you start getting familiar with the courses that you are actually given in preparation of the academic semester that will actually start soon. So, in conclusion, I'd say if you are an accepted student at Just Life University, we urge you to actually get conversant with this information or with this process so that you do not actually get to miss out any point of this process. Because if you miss out any point in this process, it will mean that you'll be left out. Okay? You'll be left out. It will mean that if you do not have the registration transcript, it will mean that you won't be able to actually know the process. If you do not have the student portal number, it would mean that you won't be able to actually interact with the school. So we urge you to actually get familiar with the process. Thank you very much.